Hello. Today we're reading from The Magicians of Caprona by Diana Wynne Jones. This is the series where I make fan art of books I've been reading lately and read fragments from said books, hoping that it will encourage you to go check out the books for yourselves. Here we go. And through doing the washing up properly, which took nearly an hour, Tonino was saying to himself, "And then I can read my book at last." When it was finally done, he sped out into the yard, and there was old Niccolo hurrying down the steps to meet him in the dark. "Tonino, may I have Benvenuto for a while, please?" But Benvenuto was still not to be found. Tonino began to think he would die of book frustration. All the children joined in hunting and calling, but there was still no Benvenuto. Soon, most of the grown-ups were looking for him too, and still Benvenuto did not appear. Antonio was so exasperated that he seized Tonino's arm and shook him. "It's too bad, Tonino. You must have known we'd need Benvenuto. Why did you let him go?" "I didn't. You know what Benvenuto's like," Tonino protested, equally exasperated. Now, said old Niccolo, taking each of them by a shoulder. "It is quite plain by now that Benvenuto is on the other side of town, making vile noises on the roof somewhere. All we can do is hope someone empties a jug of water on him soon. It's not Tonino's fault, Antonio." Antonio let go of Tonino's arm and rubbed both hands on his face. He looked very tired. "I'm sorry, Tonino," he said. "Forgive me. Let us know as soon as Benvenuto comes back, won't you?" He and old Niccolo hurried back to the scriptorium. As they passed under the light, their faces were stiff with worry. "I don't think I like war, Tonino," Paolo said. "Let's go and play table tennis in the dining room." "I'm going to read my book," Tonino said firmly. He thought he would get like Aunt Gina if anything else happened to stop him. Tonino read half the night. With all the grown-ups hard at work in the scriptorium, there was no one to tell him to go to bed. Corina tried when she had finished her homework, but Tonino was too deep in the book even to hear her. And Corina went respectfully away, thinking that, as the book had come from Uncle Umberto, it was probably very learned. It was not in the least learned. It was the most gripping story Tonino had ever read. It started with a boy, Giorgio, going along a mysterious alleyway near the docks on his way home from school. There was a peeling blue house at the end of the alley, and, just as Giorgio passed it, a scrap of paper fluttered from one of its windows. It contained a mysterious message which led Giorgio at once into a set of adventures with the enemies of his country. Each one was more exciting than the last. Well after midnight, when Giorgio was holding a pass single-handed against the enemy, Tonino happened to hear his father and mother coming to bed. He was forced to leave Giorgio lying wounded and dive into bed himself. All night he dreamed of notes fluttering from the windows of peeling blue houses, of Giorgio, who was sometimes Tonino himself and sometimes Paolo, and of villainous enemies, most of whom seemed to have red beards and black hair, like Guido Petrocchi, and as the sun rose, he was too excited to stay asleep. He woke up and went on reading. When the rest of the Casa Montana began to stir, Tonino had finished the book. Giorgio had saved his country. Tonino was quivering with excitement and exhaustion. He wished the book was twice as long. If it had not been time to get up, he would have gone straight back to the beginning and started reading the book again. And the beauty of it, he thought, eating breakfast without noticing, was that Giorgio had saved his country, not only single-handed, but without a spell coming into it anywhere. If Tonino was going to save Caprona, that was the way he would like to do it. Around Tonino, everyone else was complaining and Lucia was sulking. The washing up spell was still about in the kitchen. Every cup and plate was covered with a thin layer of orange spaghetti grease, and the butter tasted of soap. "What did she use, in heaven's name?" groaned Uncle Lorenzo. "This coffee tastes of tomato." "Her own words to the angel of Caprona," Aunt Maria said, and shuddered as she picked up her greasy cup. "Lucia, you fool," said Rinaldo. "That's the strongest tune there is." All right, stop going on at me, I'm sorry," Lucia said angrily. "So are the rest of us, unfortunately," sighed Uncle Lorenzo. "If only I could be like Giorgio," Tonino thought, as he got up from the table. "I suppose what I should have to do is to find the words to the angel." He went to school without seeing anything on the way, wondering how he could manage to do that when the rest of the family had failed. He was realistic enough to know that he was simply not good enough at spells to make up the words in the ordinary way. It made him sigh heavily. "Cheer up," said Paolo as they went into school. "I'm all right," Tonino said. He was surprised Paolo should think he was miserable. He was not miserable at all. He was wrapped in delightful dreams. "Maybe I can do it by accident," he thought. He sat in class composing strings of gibberish to the tune of the angel, in hopes that some of it might be right. But that did not seem satisfactory somehow. Then, in a lesson that was probably history, for he did not hear a word of it, it struck him like a blinding light what he had to do. He had to find the words, of course. The first Duke must have written them somewhere and lost the paper. Tonino was the boy whose mission it was to discover that lost paper. No nonsense about making up words, just straight detective work. And Tonino was positive that the book had been a clue. He must find the peeling blue house, and the paper with the words on would be somewhere near. "Tonino," asked the teacher for the 4th time, "where did Marco Polo journey to?" Tonino did not hear the question, but he realized he was being asked something. "The angel of Caprona," he said. Nobody at school got much sense out of Tonino that day. He was full of the wonder of his discovery. It did not occur to him that Uncle Umberto had looked in every piece of writing in a university library and had not found the words to the angel. After school, he avoided Paolo and his cousins. As soon as they were safely headed for the Casa Montana, Tonino set off in the opposite direction, towards the docks and quays by the new bridge. An hour later, Rosa said to Paolo, "What's the matter with Benvenuto? Look at him." Paolo leaned over the gallery rail beside her. Benvenuto, looking surprisingly small and piteous, was running backwards and forwards just inside the gate, mewing frantically. Every so often, as if he was too distracted to know what he was doing, he sat down, shot out a hind leg, and licked it madly. Then he leaped up and ran about again. Paolo had never seen Benvenuto behave like this. He called out, "Benvenuto, what's the matter?" Benvenuto swung round, crouching low on the ground, and stared urgently up at him. His eyes were like 2 yellow beacons of distress. He gave a string of mews, so penetrating and so demanding that Paolo felt his stomach turn uneasily. "What is it, Benvenuto?" called Rosa. Benvenuto's tail flapped in exasperation. He gave a great leap and vanished somewhere out of sight. Rosa and Paolo hung by their midriffs over the rail and craned after him. Benvenuto was now standing on the water butt, with his tail slashing. As soon as he knew they could see him, he stared fixedly at them again and uttered a truly appalling noise. Wong, 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 wong. Paolo and Rosa, without more ado, swung towards the stairs and clattered down them. Benvenuto's wails had already attracted all the other cats in the casa. They were running across the yard and dropping from roofs before Paolo and Rosa were halfway down the stairs. They were forced to step carefully to the water bottom among the smooth, furry bodies and staring, anxious green or yellow eyes. "Meow-wow," Benvenuto said peremptorily when they reached him. He was thinner and browner than Paolo had ever seen him. There was a new rent in his left ear, and his coat was in ragged spikes. He looked truly wretched. "Meow," he reiterated from a wide pink mouth. "Something's wrong," Paolo said uneasily. "He's trying to say something." Guiltily, he wished he had kept his resolution to learn to understand Benvenuto. But when Tonino could do it so easily, it had never been worth the bother. Now here was Benvenuto with an urgent message, perhaps word from Chrestomanci, and he could not understand it. "We'd better get Tonino," he said. Benvenuto's tail slashed again. "Meow," he said, with tremendous force and meaning. Around Paolo and Rosa, the pink mouths of all the other cats opened too. Meow! It was deafening. Paolo stared helplessly. It was Rosa who tumbled to their meaning. "Tonino!" she exclaimed. "They're saying Tonino! Paolo, where is Tonino?" With a jolt of worry, Paolo realized he had not seen Tonino since breakfast. And as soon as he realized that, Rosa knew it too. And such was the nature of the Casa Montana that the alarm was given then and there. Aunt Gina shot out of the kitchen holding a pair of kitchen tongs in one hand and a ladle in the other. Domenico and Aunt Maria came out of the saloon, and Elizabeth appeared in the gallery outside the music room with the 5 little cousins. The door of the scriptorium opened, filled with anxious faces. Benvenuto gave a whisk of his tail and leaped for the gallery steps. He bounded up them, followed by the other cats, and Paolo and Rosa hurried up too, in a sort of shoal of leaping black and white bodies. Everyone converged on Antonio's rooms. People poured out of the scriptorium. Elizabeth raced around the gallery, and Aunt Maria and Aunt Gina clambered up the steps by the kitchen quite quicker than either had ever climbed in her life. The casa filled with the sound of hollow running feet. The whole family jammed themselves after Rosa and Paolo into the room where Tonino was usually to be found reading. There was no Tonino, only the red book lying on the windowsill. It was no longer shiny. The pages were thick at the edges, and the red cover was curling upwards, as if the book was wet. Benvenuto, with his jagged brown coat up in a ridge along his back, and his tail fluffed like a fox's brush, landed on the sill beside the book and rashly put his nose forward to sniff it. He leaped back again, shaking his head, crouching and growling like a dog. Smoke poured up from the book. People coughed, and cats sneezed. The book curled and writhed on the sill amid clouds of smoke, exactly as if it were on fire. But instead of turning black, it turned pale grey-blue where it smoked, and looked slimy. The room filled with a smell of rotting. "Ugh!" said everybody. Old Nicola barged members of his family right and left to get near it. He stood over it and sang in a strong tenor voice, almost as good as Marco's, 3 strange words. He sang them twice before he had to break off coughing. "Sing!" he croaked, with tears pouring down his face. "All of you!" All the Montanas obediently broke into song, 3 long notes in unison, again and again. After that, quite a number of them had a cough, though the smoke was distinctly less. Old Niccolo recovered and waved his arms like the conductor of a choir. All who could sang once more. It took 10 repetitions to halt the decay of the book. By that time, it was a shriveled triangle about half the size it had been. Gingerly, Antonio leaned over and opened the window beyond it to let out the last of the smoke. "What was it?" he asked old Niccolo, Someone trying to suffocate us all? I thought it came from Umberto, Elizabeth faltered. I never would have. Old Niccolo shook his head. This thing never came from Umberto, and I don't think it was meant to kill. Let's see what kind of spell it is. He snapped his fingers and held out a hand, rather like a surgeon performing an operation. Without needing to be told, Aunt Gina put her kitchen tongs into his hand. Carefully, gently, old Niccolo used the tongs to open the cover of the book. A good pair of tongs ruined, Aunt Gina said. Shh, said old Niccolo. The shriveled pages of the book had struck into a gummy block. He snapped his fingers and held out his hand again. This time, Rinaldo put the pen he was carrying in it. And a good pen, he said, with a grimace at Aunt Gina. With the pen as well as the tongs, old Niccolo was able to pry the pages of the book apart without touching them and peel them over, one by one. Chins rested on both Paolo's shoulders as everyone craned to see, and there were chins at the shoulders of those with the chins. There was no sound, but the sound of breathing. On nearly every page, the printing had melted away, leaving a slimy, leathery surface quite unlike paper, with only a mark or so left in the middle. Old Niccolo looked closely at each mark and grunted. He grunted again at the first picture, which had faded like the print, but left a clearer mark. After that, though there was no print on any of the pages, the remaining mark was steadily clearer, up to the center of the book, when it began to become more faded again, until the mark was barely visible on the back page. Old Niccolo laid down the pen and tongs in a terrible silence. Right through, he said at length. People shifted and someone coughed, but nobody said anything. I do not know, said old Niccolo, the substance this object is made of, but I know a calling charm when I see one. Tonino must have been like one hypnotized, if he had read all this. He was a bit strange at breakfast, Paolo whispered. I'm sure he was, said his grandfather. He looked reflectively at the shriveled stump of the book, and then around at the crowded faces of his family. Now who, he asked softly, would want to set a strong calling charm on Tonino Montana? Who would be mean enough to pick on a child? Who would? He turned suddenly on Benvenuto, crouched beside the book, and Benvenuto cowered right down, quivering, with his ragged ears flat against his flat head. Where were you last night, Benvenuto? He asked, more softly still. No one understood the reply Benvenuto gave as he cowered, but everyone knew the answer. It was in Antonio and Elizabeth's harrowed faces, in the set of Rinaldo's chin, in Aunt Francesca's narrowed eyes, narrowed almost out of existence, and in the way Aunt Maria looked at Uncle Lorenzo. But most of all, it was in the way Benvenuto threw himself down on his side, with his back to the room, the picture of a cat in despair. Old Niccolo looked up. Now isn't that odd? He said gently. Benvenuto spent last night chasing a white she-cat over the roofs of the Casa Petrocchi. He paused to let that sink in. So Benvenuto, he said, who knows a bad spell when he sees one, was not around to warn Tonino. But why? Elizabeth asked despairingly. Old Niccolo went, if possible, quieter still. I can only conclude, my dear, that the Petrocchis are being paid by Florence, Siena, or Pisa. There was another silence, thick and meaningful. Antonio broke it. Well, he said, in such a subdued, grim way that Paolo stared at him. Well, are we going? Of course, said old Niccolo. Domenico, fetch me my small black spell book. Everyone left the room so suddenly, quietly, and purposefully that Paolo was left behind, not clear on what was going on. He turned uncertainly to go to the door and realized that Rosa had been left behind too. She was sitting on Tonino's bed with one hand on her head, white as Tonino's sheets. That's all I've got for you today. If you're curious about what happens next, I encourage you to get the book yourselves. Thanks so much for watching. Please have a nice rest of your day. Bye.